So welcome, this is yin yoga, candlelight yin is what I've been calling this, because I like the lights all low and spooky. We are going to start with a butterfly pose, which you can do either as a forward bend, so feet together folding over your feet, or as a reclining position. I'm going to do it as a reclining position, and I am going to go ahead and add one little extra layer to it, and that is I'm going to put a pillow or a rolled up blanket. I'm going to do a pillow tonight, but I'll show you how to achieve this with a blanket as well. So I'm going to put a pillow down the length of my spine. This pillow is, I don't know, like maybe 4 inches tall or so. If I have a blanket, I generally just roll it up or fold it up so that it's a couple of inches wide enough that it sort of makes a little just slightly wider than the spine, so it kind of holds the muscle on either side, and then just roll that up and that goes down the middle. This is a little bit more subtle for me. If your blanket is thicker, you might get a little bit bigger. You know, when you roll it up, it might become a much bigger shape, right? Comparatively speaking. So just choose an appropriate shape for yourself. If you are in a chilly space, a cool space, you can certainly cover with a blanket once you're arranged in your pose. And that is a nice way to sort of just stay nice and toasty. With yin, we do yin when our muscles are cold. And by that we mean we haven't been doing a lot of vigorous physical exercise. Ambient temperature is not as critical. Yin does not have to be done in a cold environment. And so if your environment is chilly, you can make yourself warmer by adding layers of clothes and or blankets. Okay. Now, I may not have had to say that, but there it is. So I'm going to take the butterfly shape with my legs. I've got a little blanket here just to create, I want to find a stretch right at the very beginning of sensation. So I feel this little inner thigh. For me, it's mostly inner thigh. There's a little bit of activity in my low back as well, but largely the inner thighs. And I want the position of the blanket to be so that I just feel that. If then the pose gets softer and I stop feeling that sensation, then I just take the props away a little bit. It's better to start gently and then increase the sensation than to start at a really high level of sensation where you tighten up and tense up your muscle to try to prevent an injury. And sometimes that kind of flies under the radar a little bit. You may not even realize you're doing it. And so part of the practice is to be very body conscious, very aware of how you're holding tension or stress in your body. Now, the pillow for me is soft enough that I have it down to about the bottom of my rib cage. If the object you're using is firmer and it feels like it's pushing in between the vertebrae or pushing the muscles in between your ribs, slide the support all the way up under your shoulder blades so that the big wide bone of the shoulder blade is holding on to the object under you, and that will make it a little bit more comfortable generally. If it's softer and squishier, it'll probably be fine. Yoga blocks I like way up high, and then the softer props are fine down a little lower. Now I'm getting just this little bit of a stretch right here at the front of my chest because I've elevated my torso and my arm is dropping off the edge. And you can change the way that feels by taking the arms out wider or changing the shape of the arms, bending at the elbow, arms straighter. You can kind of play with where you think that should go. I go for, again, the most subtle, like I feel a little something happening right there in this kind of front part of the shoulder, a little pocket just above the armpit right there in the front of the shoulder. And then we're just going to stay a while, so stay, breathe. If you want to put on some music in the background at your house, put on some nice music to listen to. Really what we're doing with yoga practice is being present in the moment, and whatever the moment is, however it's unfolding, that's our presence. So I enjoy some music. It's hard to stream that over the internet along with everything else, but at your house you could just put it on the stereo. Or from your phone, whatever works. I'm doing while I'm staying put is noticing tension and releasing it, taking nice, deep, smooth breaths, and just trying to lean into being right here, right now, letting go of all the stuff I worry about and other things that might be like stuff I'm planning on for later, that sort of jazz. Just letting go of all of that. Just being fully present right here. Stay for another 30 seconds or so, about 5 deep breaths. First thing I'm going to change is just my legs. I'm just going to bring those together. And then the second thing I'm going to change is my back. So I'll roll over, make it as lazy as possible. And then I'm going to come back onto my back here. And just take a moment to appreciate whatever subtle shifts there are. So for me, there's this kind of sense that initially I sort of feel like an impression sort of where the pillow was underneath me, and then now everything is sort of settling back into place, and it feels like my upper back and chest sort of spread out wide like a big meadow of upper back. Just feels really nice just to hang out with that. Sometimes I like to for the legs kind of lean to the internal rotation, right? They were externally rotated, left laying out, and so moving them back and forth like little windshield wipers and kind of lean and inward feels kind of nice and balancing. So you can do whatever seems like a nice idea to you. Curl your knees in, give yourself a little back massage. And at some point we're going to do a banana shape. So if you're not ready yet, don't come into the shape yet, but when you get ready, you're going to stretch out like a big, long, sort of long noodle. And then just curve over to one side. So start with your upper body and see what happens. Just curve, so the spine is technically flexing to the side. So right now my left side is longer, the right side is kind of curling in, right? It feels like the right side is kind of coming together. So the left side is the side I'm going to play with if I want to add on. If this is enough, I've got sensation down my outer hip and sides of the waist, then good, we're good. Or you can add on by just swinging the legs a little bit over to the right, so there's a little bit more sensation coming down the outer hip, outer thigh. Or you can take that leg, so in my case the left leg goes up on top and cross it at the ankle. And then as you let the hip get heavy, for me anyway, there's a little bit more tug on that outer side of my thigh, kind of the IT band area of the outer hip. Now that's a resistant area of tissue. It doesn't like to be bullied. So be gentle, like you go just to the point of like, oh, I feel something happening. It feels a little bit different on one side than the other, and pause. Now, as far as the arms go, you can have the arms overhead, you can bend at the elbows, you can take the arms down lower, even wrap them around you if you want. Usually what I do is the long side arm, I kind of let that arc over, and then I just let it rest, kind of bend like a little cactus arm the other side, and let it rest together, or I let that arm kind of hang out down lower if it feels better on a given day. We just get kind of heavy and still and breathe. We're going to stay with this guy for about 3 minutes or so, a lot less time than we spent with that last pose. Again, as you hang out with the pose, breathe, kind of lean into letting go and getting softer, a little heavier in the body. We're going to stay for about another minute. I'll try to give you those little warnings, like a last minute kind of warning, and you can decide at that point if it's appropriate for you to come out of the pose. Like sometimes maybe you don't want to hold them as long. You can certainly decide to come out of the pose and then just spend a little bit more time with the movement in between. If it's feeling kind of good and things are starting to get softer and it's easier to let go, definitely stay. So we're going to do 3 more breaths. And then we just kind of meander back to the center. Ooh. And I like to, again, just kind of pause for a second. Notice what there is to notice. Like my left leg feels a little longer than my right leg. And then kind of slowly start to do a little movement. We don't want to be too abrupt. Generally, you want to come out of yin poses nice and slow. Spend a kind of leisurely amount of time allowing yourself some movement in between. Sometimes we'll do 2 poses and then we'll do some movement. That's fine too. And just sort of allow yourself that a little bit more leisurely approach. And then we'll stretch out nice and tall and come over the other direction. And again, just, so, this side might be different than the other side. There might be more intensity or less intensity. Don't be afraid to adjust. Allow yourself to relax into your pose when you're ready. If you're not quite ready yet, don't come in here yet. And then get heavy, relax, and breathe. So we're going to stay for about another minute. So we've got about 3 more breaths. And then, when you're ready, just come on back. See if things are more even. And kind of leisurely let yourself move a little bit. Now, we're going to essentially just flip over to do a Sphinx pose. But if you like, you can take a little bit of time on your hands and knees to do some cat shapes. Or if you want to do like a downward dog or something like that first, you can throw that in. Sometimes that's nice. A little child's pose, anything like that might be nice. So, generally speaking, if I haven't been doing too many forward bending shapes, the Sphinx feels pretty good. So forward bending shapes need a little bit more time. But when you're ready, you're going to come to a Sphinx. Now, there's 3 kind of layers to the Sphinx. The middle layer is the one that most clearly resembles the little Sphinx, like the little, your little paws up front. And I find that if my elbow is slightly forward of the shoulder and a little bit closer together than shoulder distance apart with both elbows, that I get the best relaxation. So if I tuck the elbows in too tight, it feels like everything wants to collapse around my neck. If it's too far forward, it feels like a strain in the shoulder. So just finding that middle ground and where it feels as stable as possible so that you can relax is what you're going for. If it still feels too intense in your low back, cross your arms and you can rest your chin or your forehead on your crossed arms. And that gives you just the tiniest little inclination of a back bend, which is the crocodile is what that's referred to as. Or you can push up on your hands and do the seal, okay? So you're just gonna, like, there's extremes going the other direction and then the ground in the middle. Pick the one that's right for you. Try to let your legs and glutes mostly relax. So for me, if I push up to the seal, everything in my back body tightens up to try to protect my back. So I know the Sphinx is pretty much the exact right spot for me. Crocodile's not bad either. So just choose for yourself which you think is the right one. Let your body relax as best you can. Just breathe. Enjoy the pose. You know, back bends have certain flavors to them. Do things for us. So if it's not your friend, go down to the crocodile, try that guy, and then, you know, in a little bit, it might be appropriate to come out of there. So for now, we're going to settle in here for about 2 more minutes. 30 seconds or so left. Now what we're going to do is frog pose, and frog can be anywhere between a wide-kneed child's pose, which is referred to as the tadpole, generally in the yin world. So the knees are wide, but the toes are together, and you send the hips back. Or you can take the knees out as wide as they will go, and flip your feet out like little frog flippers, and then set the hips back until there's a sensation in the groin and inner thigh area. The hip sockets, and definitely there might be some low back, it's a little bit of a back bend, so there might be some low back sensation as well. And so that's the frog pose, and if you prefer to do it more like the tadpole, do that wide-kneed child's pose, maybe even adding like a pillow underneath you to give yourself something to land on instead of your elbows would be a good way to modify this pose. I find it quite spicy, so we're gonna stay for about 2 more minutes, but a little over that, but not a crazy long period of time. It just feels like a long time. Try to relax as best you can. Take nice deep breaths. Let yourself sort of settle into the intensity. If it's too intense, back off a little bit. Take your hips forward, or add the extra props. Always feels like time slows down when I do this pose. It might be one of its little side benefits. Making time go slower. So we got a last minute here, yogis. Or this is the moment where you say, I have had enough. To come out of it, you can either move forward if that feels safe, or really press your hands into the mat, come away from the pose, and pick each knee up and bring it to the center. I'm going to give it a little bit longer. But if you're ready, you can come out a little earlier. Now, usually after this pose, I like to lay on my belly and cry softly to myself for a few moments. But downward dog also sometimes feels really nice after this pose. So I'm gonna come out. So come away from it. I'm tucking my toes under, and I pick up a knee and then pick up the other one. And that sort of engages the muscle in the inner thigh, and oh, it feels good. So, you know, it's a good way to come out a little bit on the more engaged muscle side of things. Slithering forward was the other option. Oh. So if you came out and it felt like, I don't know if I liked that dismount, then you can try a different way next time. So we are going to come to a seated position. Again, you might want to take a moment just to sort of move around a little bit. So from the inner thigh, we're going to move to the outer hip with the next little sequence of poses that we do. So, we're a little more outer hip oriented. Hopefully that will be balancing or seem balancing. It seems balancing to me, so hopefully it will seem that way to you as well. So I have a few props that I like to have handy. A pillow of some sort. This is a big long pillow made for yoga called a bolster, but couch cushions work, or a couple of bed pillows so that you can stack on top of each other. I like to have a blanket in case I want to like tuck a corner under a hip or I need to protect a knee. And then I also like to have a yoga block. And again, yoga blocks are weird props, but a throw pillow can be used in place of a yoga block or an extra blanket. So if you've got a handful of things sort of at your disposal, you'll be ready for whatever comes up with the pose. And again, you might want that extra blanket to cover up with once we get into the shape in the event that things are chilly at your house. So we're gonna start with some variation on legs or stacking on top of each other in a seated position. So the first variation of that is to stack the knees on top of each other, settle into the hips, and some people can pull the feet right down around the edges of the hip and fold forward. Another option would be to stack the shins, which this is more approachable for me because I can get my hips level, and you kind of make a square here. It's referred to as the square pose. And then you can also take the legs off so that the top leg is not stacked on top of the bottom leg per se, but you just bring in a cross-legged seating position, you bring your legs into that square position. They're still crossed one over the other. And then I like to do kind of a hybrid of those last two. I take a block and put it up front so that I can angle the shin a little differently, and also my ankle joint doesn't press onto my inner thigh in an uncomfortable way. So that's another option. There's some empty space here. It might feel nice to fill that empty space so that the thigh bone feels like it has some support. And then you have to feel out with your outer hip. Is it better for you to lean back a little bit in this shape? Can you sit up tall, and is that the right amount of sensation? Or should you fold forward some amount? And you'll go as far as you, either when you wind up laying on your legs or your elbows are resting on the floor, that's as far as you want to go. Clearly, you've run out of space at that point. So it doesn't have to be that much. It can just be a tiny little tilt forward. I like to build some arm rests. So a little place for an arm. So you can add a little, adjust a little as you like. So we're just trying to get the legs as close together as possible, and we're going for this sort of sensation in the outer hip. You might feel it more on one side than the other. So we're gonna hold these next couple of poses a little bit longer. So we're gonna stay with this guy for about 2 more minutes. And again, if you realize like, I don't need to hold it any longer, it's okay to come out of the pose altogether, do some movement pattern that feels nice, or just lay on your back like a big star, just kind of spread out and hang out there. That's a perfect kind of pose to just feel the implications or the I don't know if like signature is the word I want to use, but I'm not sure that's the right. You know, every pose kind of leaves us in a certain way, kind of has sort of an impact on the body. And so just stretching out on your back is a great way to just feel what happened with what happened with that pose? How did it impact me? So you can do that in between every pose if you like, just to give yourself a little bit less time in each shape. For me, I find that if I stay over the 3-minute mark, kind of in that 4, starting to bridge into 5 minutes, there's some real benefits. I feel my body relax a little bit more. I feel a little bit more kind of softening in the tissue. And when I'm done, I feel more hydrated and I have a smoother range of motion. So those are all good reasons to stick around. But you have to, decide on your own. You're the one in charge of your body. So do what's right for you. So we are inside that last minute here. So we're gonna do 2 more breaths. Now to get out of the shape, I'm gonna lift all the way up and kind of back off and take this top leg off the top of the stack. And that guy is gonna go just right out in front. Right on, so I'm just gonna straighten that leg out. I'm gonna leave this leg basically folded the same way it was, and just let my foot kind of ride somewhere on the inner part of my leg. If you wanna pull your foot up tighter or put it down looser, you can do that. Just make this knee happy on this side. You can add little blankets to underneath things as you like. So I'm leaning forward a little bit and then just kind of lifting my hip and letting that shift back. So I'm trying to orient myself kind of straight down the center here. And then I'm gonna let this leg completely relax. Normally, in the yang yoga styles, we kind of keep this foot engaged, the knee a little bent, the quads really on. But in yin, we really wanna let everything relax. I'm trying to get to that connective tissue fascial layer that wraps around under the skin and over the muscle. And so again, that's why we're not going for really big sensation. We're going for like, oh, I feel a little hamstring, something or something. I feel a little something, something in my hamstrings. So for you, that might be way back here that you feel it, rather than bringing the pelvis and the torso forward. So you want to choose the right amount of forward momentum, or momentum might be the wrong word, but the right amount of forward folding for your body. And then we just hang out. So this is up the back of the leg and up through our glute and up through our back. You can even let the head hang forward if you like, so you'll get the back of the neck a little bit as well. I'm going to stay with this kind of forward bending straight portion of the pose for 1 more minute, and then we're going to make a little subtle change to it. Well, maybe not so subtle, but we're going to make a little change, but keep the legs in the same orientation for the last couple minutes. So we're gonna take a big breath, sit all the way up. And then still with this little butterfly shape, we're just gonna add a twist. I'm just gonna turn towards the long leg in that direction. And you can, you know, rest your hands wherever you like. I'm trying to find a convenient handle myself. And sometimes the outer part of the thigh works. Yep, I think that'll be okay. And you can also just rest your arms. You don't have to hold on. It just sometimes makes it a little easier to give the arms something to do. You can turn your head the other way, keep it going into the twist. We're gonna stay here for about another minute or so. Okay, we're gonna take a big breath and then unwind ourselves. So we're gonna come all the way around. Now, this is gonna turn into the swan, and I'm gonna keep my folded leg as my folded leg for the swan. And I'm gonna do what I call a half and half swan tonight. I'm gonna do half of swan where I'm face down, and then half of my swan face up. So I'm gonna start with the face down version, but if you wanna do the whole thing on your back, you'll keep this bent leg as your bent leg, lay on your back and bring that leg in towards your chest. And then you can hold on to it with the other leg or just hold on to the bent leg as you see fit. Right? We're aiming for this outer hip again. So I'm gonna turn this into a swan by just swinging this long leg behind me and kind of reorienting myself. And usually for me, it helps to have something like a blanket underneath the hip. And sometimes I like to go a little closer to the ground, and sometimes I like to keep more of a little back bending shape. So because I'm gonna do half of this pose lying on my back, I'm gonna go for the back bending shape for the first half. So you can choose to either follow along with me or do your own version, however long you like, either all on your back or all on your belly, as you see fit. Kind of on the belly. Face down or face up, that's probably easier description. I'm gonna stay with this guy for about another minute and a half-ish before I flip things upside down. Give you like that little halfway, so that'll be like the halfway mark. And then I'll give you that last minute mark as well, just as a separate note, if in case you're staying put. Look maybe a little more complicated than it really is. I'm gonna put this pillow under my hip, And then essentially, I'm just gonna roll all the way around so this bent leg is still coming toward me. Oh. My hips are gonna rest on the pillow so that I still get this hip flexor stretch. And then I'm just gonna hang on to this leg. Now, again, you can have that leg in here if you want to, and hang on to it that way. Now, in holding onto the lower leg, I want to be really mindful of my knee, so I try to keep my toes and my kneecap pointing the same direction, just so that I'm not twisting the lower leg bones around. Ooh. We'll stay for about 2 more minutes. This is our last minute. So if this is the point where you're ready to sort of come out of the pose, that's your opportunity to just lie down or move around. And we'll all do that together a little bit as well. You'll just kind of start earlier than the rest. We're all basically at home by ourselves anyway, so. I like to think of us as like a collective across time and space, all practicing together. But in reality, you're at your house, you get to decide what to do. Oh goodness, I crack myself up sometimes, pardon me. So we're here for probably another 4 or 5 breaths, if that helps you out. Depends on how big your breaths are. Now, if you're in the regular swan and it's time to come out, you're going to lean into that bent leg hip and just bring your back leg around. And then for this upside down or reverse swan, I let go of the leg that I was holding onto and then bring the other leg up to meet it. And then I get myself off of the pillow so that I can either do some movement or stretch out and just relax. So we're essentially what we're going to eventually do, all of us, is just take this starfish pose where the legs and arms kind of make a big star, and then just relax into that shape. And if it helps you, you can put something under the legs, like a pillow or a blanket, so that there's a little bit less pressure on the low back. I find that very helpful. Again, cover with a blanket if you're chilly, and then just let yourself relax into the shape. And notice, like, is there a difference between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere? Are there sensations on the one leg or one hip that feel like something that you should avoid next time by adding a few more props, or maybe doing a different version of the pose? Do you have a kind of pleasant sensation in the body? Quite often when I do this practice, there's a kind of pleasant, what I would call effervescent, sort of like if champagne bubbles were a sensation. Just kind of a light, bubbly sensation. It doesn't feel like pins and needles. It doesn't feel like that kind of numbness that comes from pinching nerves, but it does feel kind of pleasantly warm. So we're going to stay here for another minute, just chillaxing in between sides. It's okay to move. You don't have to hold still. You can, if you want to do, like, sometimes it feels really good to me to like stretch the toes apart, do some little ankle circles, some little neck movement, just to kind of release any tension that might be stuck. You've figured out that you're holding some stress in your body. Now, we're going to take 2 more breaths, and then we're going to come back to the seated position to do that whole sequence on the other side. The tricky part of this, of course, is going to be remembering which leg you started with. Hopefully, we're going to figure that out relatively easily. So, we're coming up to our seated position, and of course, move all you want on your way to the seated position. If you need a little more movement, do a little bit more. Now, I know last time this was my leg that was bent, so I know that one was on the bottom of the stack. So that guy is the one that's going to go on top this time. So if that helps you kind of figure out, oh yeah. Now I remember which one was my bent leg last time. Oh. So whatever your version of this you're doing, 2 knees on top of each other, 2 shins on top, or some hybrid cross-legged position. Again, deciding, because this hip might be different, should you lean back a little bit, sit more upright, lean forward, and then once you're kind of snuggled in, we'll stay. So we're going to repeat this sequence on the other side, and then Shavasana with a little bit of like movement in between. So we're nearing the home stretch here on the practice. Oh. Sometimes I noticed like I had a little too much support, right? So it felt good at the first, and then as I sank into the pose, it started to feel not as good. So don't be afraid to adjust your props. Try not to fidget, where you're constantly moving, but don't try to hold still either. It's kind of more about letting go, sort of surrendering into the shape, leaning into it a little bit with your inner self, leaning into being still. Kind of what we're after. And it's a softer thing than active, right? It's more receptive than active. Relax places like around your mouth or around the eyes where you might carry stress without realizing it. Let the shoulders fall away from the ears a little bit. Give yourself permission to be relaxed and soft. Got 1 minute left here. So this could be that minute that you come out and do some movement instead. And take a nice big breath. Float up and back to release the legs. And again, the top leg is going to go out straight. And then the bottom leg is mostly going to stay bent. So depending on where it's comfortable for your foot to ride, I like it to just be whatever loose shape it is. Again, for the first couple minutes of this, I'm leaning forward into a forward bend. And then we'll do a little twist for the last couple minutes. You need a few moments, a little bit of movement before you settle into this pose. By all means, take yourself, let yourself take, whatever time you need to come into your pose. And if there's too much sensation down the back of the leg, through the glute and the spine, you can most certainly back off a little bit. Don't fold forward quite as much. If it feels like your back is really rounding and it's all a story about your low back, let yourself sit up a little taller and just move the pelvis as far forward as it's willing to go. Even a tiny micro movement of the pelvis can be enough to create that tension on the fascia and the other connective tissue that the fascia spins into, like the tendons. A little gentle tension on that is what we're after. We're trying to get the tissue to hydrate, and that doesn't take a lot of pressure. We're not going for big sensation. So we're gonna stay here for, it's just shy of 1 more minute, and then we'll do our twisty part. Sit up nice and tall. Once you've gotten that nice kind of height and it feels pretty good, you might take a second to sort of settle into it. Then give yourself time to twist. And for me, it takes about 3 sort of relax, twist again. Take a breath, relax, twist again, to kind of get the full twist that my back is going to really let me have. So I go for that. I just let myself take that time so that I'm not, again, I'm not trying to strain or be too pushy. I really want, the word yin implies this very soft power, where the power comes from letting go into the pose that we're doing. So approaching it in a more gentle, soft way is appropriate. We're gonna stay for 3 more breaths. Out of the twist. And this is gonna slowly, and again, take your time. We're just gonna slowly morph ourselves into our swan pose. And again, I'm gonna do the little half and half swan, half upright, half laying on the back. You can do whichever version of the swan seems appropriate to you. Oh. Sometimes I find the swan a little more friendly on this side than on the other side. So there's a little easier to relax into it. So if you notice that you might have some asymmetry, and if this is your more challenging side, soften around the mouth, soften the eyes, try to keep little places where sometimes we gather little pockets of tension as soft as you can. Just remind yourself from time to time, to let go and lean in a little bit and relax. Mentally, we know we're supposed to do that, but sometimes we have to remind our body. Stay for about another 4 breaths, and then I'm gonna flip myself over. We're just at the close to that halfway mark, right on that edge. So again, I'm gonna just take my time doing this, but I'm gonna get this pillow into place. And it might take me a little bit because I'm not angled just right. This one's gonna be harder because I lost my nice angle, but you get the idea. So I'm bringing that same bent leg is up front and the same leg where I was stretching out the leg behind me. I still get the hip flexor stretch this way. And in fact, this version for me really gives me a little bit more hip flexor stretch. So I like it for that reason. The stretch that happens under the hip lightens up a little bit, but if I rotate that leg so that my thigh bone rotates as far out as I can rotate it, I want to be mindful again of this lower leg bone torquing, but that puts that right back in, and I bring the knees slightly more to the center, slightly more to the outside. It'll change how much sensation I get in that portion of my hip. So I'm not changing, like there's still all the same areas are being touched. It's just a little different in terms of which one has more of the intensity. I do like the switch up though. Sometimes I choose to do just one or the other, but doing half and half is also kind of fun. I invite you to try it. If you didn't do it tonight, try it another night. So we're in this last minute here, yogis. Oh. All right, yogis, so if you are in the regular version, again, kind of lean in towards the bent leg hip, bring your back leg around. I'm gonna let go of that leg and then put that one on the ground first. Bring the other one up to meet it. Then I'm gonna get this pillow out from underneath me. Oh. Now I'm not going very far with that pillow because I'm gonna use it in a minute, but to start with, just kind of giving myself a little bit of time to sort of settle, move, whatever feels nice after the little sequence. Now we're just about at Shavasana. We're gonna do one more little twist to either side, laying on our back, and we'll do that for about 2 minutes each side. So not a particularly long pose, but just kind of going back to that twisting flavor that we did sitting upright. I like to do the one on the back as well. So here's what I'm doing. I'm putting a pillow down. You don't have to do that part, but it lets me kind of hook my leg around something. And then I'm gonna hook the other leg around. Now some people can hook their foot behind and it'll hold on just fine. I find the pillow helps me because I can't quite get my foot all the way around. So it just gives my legs something to kind of hook onto so I can let the legs really relax and then fully turn my torso so that my shoulders rest on the floor evenly and I'm pointing at the ceiling there. The more I lean my legs over, the more I get sensation on this outer hip. And again, we're going for something that feels kind of pleasant. There's a sensation maybe in the outer hip or up to the chest or in the shoulder, but nothing that feels too abusive or anything like that. You could give yourself a little pillow for your head or even the head and the shoulders if you like. We'll stay here for about 4 more breaths and then we'll do the other side. So it doesn't take long. Especially if I chat you up a little bit, 2 minutes goes by quick. So I'm going to do 1 more breath. And then I'm going to just slide back to the middle, take a few moments to kind of windshield wiper a little bit or just release the legs. Again, you could also just be still. It feels really nice some of the time. And then you can take the legs the opposite direction when you think you're ready. Again, if you're not ready yet, don't go yet. Take whatever time you need. This twist for me is a little spicier, so the second side's a little more intense. Just relax into it, yogis. Take deep breaths. Okay, yogi, so we're going to take about 4 more breaths here. And then when you're ready, you're just going to slide yourself back. You can do whatever movement feels nice. And this is our final relaxation. So I'm going to do corpse pose, which is just stretch out, you know, like similar to that starfish, just maybe a little tighter in the leg. So the legs are a little closer together. But you could do legs up the wall or something like that. Put your legs up over the couch if you want to, so that you have a little bit of an elevation. Cover up with a blanket if it's chilly. Just make it really comfortable. And then let yourself surrender. So whatever pose it is that's your final relaxation, this is our last pose to really feel this opportunity to let go, surrender a little bit, lean into letting our body really relax all the way. And now where nothing's really tugging on us, or not much anyway, hopefully. So we can really unwind all the tension, any places in the body where we've been carrying a little bit of stress. Just imagine those places being a little bit treated with a little bit more kindness. Imagine that your body kind of takes on a very kind and gentle demeanor. The corners of the mouth gently curl into a smile, and the eyes grow really soft and inviting. You're inviting yourself to be at home in your body. Now, yogis, take a moment to notice your breath. Take a few deep breaths. I like to sigh on the exhale. It just feels very relaxing to my brain. When you're ready, give your fingers and toes a little wiggle and your wrists and ankles some movement. Oh, and you can stretch. Curl up in a ball. And when you're ready, we'll come up to a seated position. And wish each other a good evening with one big breath together. So take a nice big inhale. Big deep sigh. Namaste, beautiful souls. Enjoy the rest of your evening.